What's up, guys? Have you ever been confused by shade smooth, shade auto smooth, or marking sharp objects inside of Blender? If so, this tutorial's for you. Let's jump in. Okay, so you're inside of Blender, right? And let's get a good look on our objects here. So our first object here is just a smooth pebble. And I'm going to bring this into focus a little better. You can do that by going to View and then Frame Selected, or hitting the period on your numpad. Okay, so yeah, now that you have this one in here, so this rock right here is going to be sufficient for shade smooth. And the reason why is because the difference between the angles of each of these faces is relatively small. We might be able to see that better if we look into edit mode. As you can see, I have my normals posted here. And so the normals is just the direction that the face is facing. And so as you can see, the difference between these various faces is pretty small. So that, and this happens with a lot of organic objects, such that, you know, just an overall shade smooth should work. So let's right click and let's do a shade smooth. So as you can see, there are no spots on this that is not smooth. And that's pretty normal for like an organic object, like a pebble or something like that. And then let's go back and redo and undo that by doing shade flat here. So what happens if we were to do a shade auto smooth on this object? Well, essentially what it's going to do is basically what shade auto smooth does is what shade smooth does is it takes the difference between these two normals, the normals that are adjacent to one another, and it interpolates them. And interpolate is a fancy word for saying it takes information that it does have, that is the angle of these faces, and it kind of tries to find a smoothing angle in between them by knowing. So it takes information that it does know to find information that it doesn't know, which is the angle in between them. So that's kind of what interpolation is. And so as you can see, it's not quite perfectly smooth though. We can see this one part right here. If we go into edit mode here, it's kind of like, why isn't this getting calculated into it? Well, for our shade auto smooth settings, we have it set to 30. So if we were to crank that up a little bit, we can watch it slowly disappear. So what's going on here? Well, I think, and now that we see it's all perfectly smooth, just like the shade smooth option would have done originally. And let's go ahead and exit that right there. And let's go back to shade flat, that object. Let's use another example to kind of help us to have better, a better understanding of what's going on here. So in this scenario, we've got a coffee mug. And as you can see, we have many different, hard parts to it, right? Now, if we were to just kind of go over here and just slap a shade smooth on this, it looks pretty bad, right? Because what it's doing is it's indiscriminately shading between all of the various faces. And so if we were to look at this in edit mode, so basically what it's doing is it's taking the normal here and the normal here, which is about and this is 90 degrees this way, this 90. So it's gonna shade this at 45 degrees, which is a pretty sharp shade there. And you can kind of see that there. Now, what about over here on the handle? Well, over here on the handle, there's hardly any difference here as far as angle goes, but a very sharp angle here. So it's going to create a pretty harsh situation here. And so we can get some artifacts. And so what we want to do is we want to be a little bit more discriminatory in how we shade. Well, one thing that we could do is we could go in here and we could say, okay, what I want you to do, shade smooth option, is I want you to know that there are certain parts that I don't want you to interpolate between them. I want you to keep those areas flat. And so what Blender has is this option where you can, say you can do Alt and then left click, and then you can do mark this one as sharp. Now, if we were to mark this one as sharp, whenever the shading does its thing, as you can see, it's not going to apply to that one area, right? And that already looks a little bit better. Let's try it. Let's try it over here. I noticed there's some very artifacty looking things on this coffee handle. So let's do maybe this one, and let's just see what happens if we were to mark that one as sharp. Now, if we look at it, not too much of a difference there. Let's try this one right here. Let's mark this one as a sharp too. Okay, it looks a little bit better as far as the handle is concerned, but obviously there's some artifacty stuff going on here. So The point is that you can go around and you can figure out, okay, where all do I want to mark sharp? It kind of reminds me of UV unwrapping a little bit, right? But instead of doing that, what Blender has is this option called a shade auto smooth. And so let's undo some of those things that we've done. There we go. Blender has a shade auto smooth option. Let's get rid of that. There we go. And so let's go ahead and shade this one flat again. And so what Blender can do for you is if you were to right click and go to shade auto smooth, what it does is it adds a modifier. And that's what it's called a smooth by angle modifier. And so what it does is it basically says, okay, anything that's sort of changing in between the two faces, and let's go into edit mode so we can see this better. Let's say in between these two faces, if this change between this normal and this normal is greater than 30, then we want to keep that one as sharp. If it's less than 30, we want to smooth that one out. And so let me show you from another angle to drive this home a little bit easier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my Z here. And what I want to do is I want to rotate this a little bit so you can just see it more clearly what we're looking at here. There we go. And so if I come down here, essentially what's happening with the shade auto smooth function is it's taking, so here's one face here, and you can see the normal going this way and the normal going this way. So there is, imagine basically in between these two, imagine if this face, this edge of this face were to keep going this way and the edge of this face were to keep going this way, basically, and we were to find the angle in between there, we're looking at like 165 degrees. Well, what that tells us is we know that obviously 180 degrees is a perfectly flat plane or a flat line. So that tells me that the amount of degree, the degree that has changed between this angle and this angle is only 15 degrees. And because we have the angle marked over here as 30 degrees, that's going to get smoothed out. Whereas up here, the angle between this one and this one is going to be, that's probably about a 90-degree angle, right? So because 90 degrees is greater than here, that one's not going to get shaded out. And so that's the reason why when you look at this, it actually looks pretty good, right? And watch this, as we crank up the angle a little bit, watch some of the things that happen, especially on this coffee handle right here. So basically what this is telling me is that at about 44 degrees or so, so this is still under that. But as soon as we crank the angle that we're discriminating, it starts to shade that one out, because now the angle that we're smoothing is getting greater than what that angle was. And we can see this happen a little bit more as we see the coffee handle right here. That one smoothed out. Now, if we were to keep going and we went all the way past 90 degrees, where the difference is between those, it's going to start to look just like it did when we just did just sort of like a blanket shade smooth option there. And so essentially what the shade smooth does is it's basically a way to discriminate which parts of the object do you want to shade smooth and which parts do you want to keep flat. And so if we go back in here, and let's just say that we want to go here and let's turn this back to like a reasonable amount, like the 30 degrees. Let's just say that we were to apply this modifier. Well, if we go back into edit mode, now we can see, you see where these blue lines are? These indicate marked sharp areas. These are areas that Blender has, well, automatically shaded to be sharp by discriminating according to the value that you gave it. So that's where the shade auto smooth comes in. It's automatically marking the parts based on the degree parameter that you fed it. It's doing that to determine where to mark the sharp, so you don't have to go through and do it manually, and hence the auto part. So the last thing that I want to show you, however, is let's just say that you don't want either of these options, right? Or you're not really worried about, the shade auto smooth option, but you do want certain parts that for whatever reason you don't want those to be smoothed out. But what about this other option, which is where you can actually go here and manually mark sharp things yourself? Like, let's just say with this coffee mug, right? Like, we've already applied the shade auto smooth, we've got the shade smooth going on, it looks pretty good. But what if there were certain parts that we wanted to also be, to be excluded from the shade smooth? So what we can do here is we can select certain edge loops. So let's say we select this one, and we'll do a shift Shift and then Alt in order to select maybe like some alternating edge loops. And I won't select too many of these. I just want to select them enough to give you an idea of kind of what I'm talking about here. So let's just say you were to select those, and then you were to mark sharp these edges, right? Now, if we go back over here, we can see that everywhere else it's very smooth, right? But now you have this interesting situation where we've got a couple of edges that are not going to be calculated in that shade smooth situation, and so then they come across as a mark sharp. I hope this tutorial was helpful. If you did enjoy it, please consider subscribing to my channel as well as liking the video, and that would mean a whole lot. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next one.